I'm Mabel, 38 female. I live in a quiet suburban neighborhood with my husband, Ben, and our two amazing kids, Lily and Leo. I work as a senior project manager, which means my life is a series of spreadsheets, timelines, and carefully managed expectations. But for the last 15 years, the one project I could never get a handle on, the one that always went over budget and off the rails, was my own family. I thought I was the glue holding them together. I didn't realize I was just the bank funding their comfort. This is the story of how one Christmas, a no-gifts agreement turned into the most humiliating day of my life, and how the smirk on my father's face finally gave me the strength to burn the whole rotten project to the ground. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The phone call came in early November, right on schedule. My mother, Evelyn, had a certain tone she used for these occasions, bright, breezy, and utterly non-negotiable. "Mabel, darling," she began, the sound of her stirring tea clinking in the background. "I've been talking with your father and with Mark and Scarlett, and we all think it's for the best if we just don't do gifts this year. For the adults, I mean. And let's keep it simple for the kids. Maybe one or two little things. Things are just so expensive, and the real gift is being together, isn't it?" I leaned against my kitchen counter, staring out at the crisp autumn leaves. "No gifts, at all?" I asked, a little surprised. Christmas in my family had always been a competitive sport. "Exactly, it's just so much pressure, don't you think?" she chirped. "Your brother is having a bit of a slow year with the housing market, and your father and I are on a fixed income. It just makes sense. A Christmas of convenience for everyone." The phrase struck me, a Christmas of convenience. It sounded so practical, so logical. As a project manager, I appreciated the efficiency. As a daughter and a sister, a small, selfish part of me felt a pang of relief. Every year, Ben and I would spend weeks agonizing over the perfect gifts for my parents, for Mark, and for his wife Scarlett. We'd spend hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars trying to find things they would genuinely love, only to see them receive the gifts with polite, but lukewarm, smiles. My gifts never seemed to hit the mark the way Mark's did. His were always flashier, more expensive looking, even if I knew for a fact that he was often struggling financially. "Okay, Mom, that sounds fine," I agreed. "So, to be clear, no gifts for the adults and one small thing for each of the kids." "Precisely," she confirmed. "Just a little something for Lily and Leo, and we'll get something small for Mason and Chloe. It will be so much more relaxed." I hung up the phone and told Ben the news. He raised an eyebrow. "No gifts, are you sure? This is your family we're talking about." "Mom's orders," I said with a shrug. "She said it was a mutual decision. Honestly, it'll save us a lot of stress and money." So we followed the rules. We told our kids, Lily and Leo, that this year at Grandma and Grandpa's would be more about carols and cookies than presents. They were a little disappointed, but being the sweet kids they are, they understood. We bought my nephew Mason a new gaming mouse he'd mentioned, and for my niece Chloe, a set of high-quality art pencils. Each gift was around $50, thoughtful, but simple, just as agreed. For my own kids, we bought them their big presents to open at our home on Christmas morning, and we picked out two smaller toys for them to unwrap at my parents' house. We were playing by the book. The weeks leading up to Christmas were unusually calm. There were no frantic last-minute shopping trips, no secret whispers about what to get my notoriously hard-to-please father. Instead, we baked, we watched Christmas movies, and we enjoyed the season without the usual layer of financial and emotional stress. I even felt closer to my family. I called my mom more often, and our conversations were light and easy, not underscored by the typical holiday tension. I felt like we had finally turned a corner, that we were all mature adults who could prioritize family connection over material things. I was an idiot. Christmas Day arrived, cold and bright. We loaded the car with our pot of mashed potatoes, the kids, two small presents, and the modest gifts for my niece and nephew. The 45-minute drive to my parents' house was filled with Christmas songs and excited chatter. The kids were excited to see their cousins, and I was genuinely looking forward to a peaceful, drama-free family gathering. When we walked in, the first thing I noticed was the tree. My parents' living room was always festive, but this was different. The base of the giant fir tree wasn't just full, it was overflowing. There were dozens of presents, wrapped in shimmering gold and red paper, stacked high. My heart did a little nervous flutter. "Wow, Mom, looks like Santa was generous," I said, trying to keep my voice light. Evelyn came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "Oh, you know," she said with a dismissive wave. "Just a few little things for the children." Mark and Scarlett were already there with their kids, Mason and Chloe. They were lounging on the sofa, looking smug. My kids ran over to greet them, their eyes wide at the mountain of presents. I exchanged a look with Ben. His expression mirrored my own unease. This was more than a few little things. This was a full-blown, extravagant Christmas display. My dad, Cameron, walked in from the garage, rubbing his hands together. "Mabel, Ben, good to see you. Put that food down and get comfortable. We're about to get this show on the road." We placed our small, neatly wrapped gifts under the tree, where they looked almost comical next to the enormous, lavishly decorated boxes already there. I tried to push the feeling of dread down. Maybe they were all from other relatives. Maybe Mark had a fantastic month and decided to splurge on his kids. It wasn't necessarily a conspiracy. I told myself to stop being paranoid and embrace the holiday spirit. But as I watched my mother directing everyone to their seats, a perfectly orchestrated performance, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was the only one in the room who hadn't been given a script. The curtain was about to rise, and I was completely unprepared for the play. All right, everyone settle down," my father, Cameron, boomed, clapping his hands together with theatrical flair. He positioned himself by the fireplace like a master of ceremonies, a role he relished. "The big man in red has been very busy, it seems. Let's see what he brought. Mason, you're the oldest, you can do the honors. Start handing them out." My nephew Mason, a lanky 15-year-old who communicated mostly in grunts, actually looked excited. He dove into the pile of presents, reading the tags aloud. "This one's for Chloe, this is for Mom, this is for Grandpa." The first red flag was a beautifully wrapped gift box handed to my mother. It was from Mark and Scarlett. No adult gifts, I thought, my stomach tightening. I glanced at Evelyn. She caught my eye for a fraction of a second before looking away, a faint blush on her cheeks. She opened it to reveal a cashmere scarf, the exact shade of blue I knew she loved. "Oh, Mark, you shouldn't have," she gushed, though her tone suggested she absolutely expected him to have. "We said no gifts." "Ah, you know," Mark said with a lazy grin, leaning back on the sofa. "Just a little something, couldn't resist." Then Scarlett received a gift. Then my father. Ben and I sat on the love seat, our hands empty, watching the exchange. Our two small gifts for the kids remained under the tree, untouched. I felt a hot flush of embarrassment creep up my neck. We were the only ones who had actually followed the rule my mother had established. Then came the onslaught for the kids. Chloe, my 13-year-old niece, tore open a box to reveal the newest iPhone. She shrieked with delight, hugging her dad. Next, Mason was handed a massive, heavy box. It took him several minutes to unwrap it, and when he did, his eyes nearly popped out of his head. It was a top-of-the-line gaming PC, the kind with liquid cooling and enough LED lights to land a plane. I knew for a fact that the setup cost upwards of $4,000. "No way, no way," Mason kept repeating, staring at the box in disbelief. "Dad, you actually got it." Mark puffed out his chest. "Only the best for my boy." The room was filled with the sounds of excited squeals and rustling paper. Chloe then opened another gift, 4 front-row VIP tickets to a concert for a pop star she was obsessed with. Scarlett was practically beaming. "We'll make a girls' trip out of it," she announced, winking at Chloe and my mother. Meanwhile, my children, Lily and Leo, sat on the floor, watching. Their faces, once filled with Christmas morning excitement, were now pale and confused. They looked at the mountain of electronics, designer clothes, and expensive gadgets being unwrapped by their cousins, and then they looked at their own empty laps. Leo, my sensitive 8-year-old, had tears welling up in his eyes. Lily, ever the stoic one, just stared at the floor, her little shoulders slumped. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, my mother seemed to remember we were there. "Oh, Mabel, you brought some things for the kids," she said with forced cheerfulness. "Let's see what you've got." I numbly pointed to the 2 small, forgotten presents still under the tree. Mason, prompted by my dad, retrieved them and handed one to Lily and one to Leo. They unwrapped them slowly. Inside were the toys we'd carefully see. Hosen, a Lego set for Leo, and a new book from a series Lily loved. On any other day, they would have been thrilled. But in this context, after watching their cousins receive thousands of dollars worth of loot, the small gifts felt like a cruel joke. Lily forced a tiny smile. "Thanks, Mom," she whispered, not looking at me. Leo just clutched his box, silent, as a single tear rolled down his cheek. That was the moment something inside me snapped. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot, bitter taste in my mouth. It wasn't about the money, it was about the lie, the deliberate, calculated deception. They had all agreed on a plan whose sole purpose was to exclude me and my family. This was a Christmas of convenience. It was a Christmas of conspiracy. I stood up, the room went quiet. "I think we need to go," I said, my voice shaking slightly. My mother's face instantly shifted from feigned cheer to alarm. "Go? Mabel, what are you talking about? We haven't even had dinner." "No, I think we're done here," I said, my voice growing steadier, harder. I turned to my children. "Lily, Leo, go get your coats on." "Mabel, what is wrong with you?" my mother demanded, her voice rising. "Why are you making a scene?" I finally looked her straight in the eye. "A scene? You're the one who called me, Mom. You're the one who said no gifts. You're the one who made up a rule that apparently only applied to us. What was this? Some kind of test? Did we pass?" My brother Mark snorted from the couch. "Oh, here we go. Can't you just be happy for your niece and nephew? It's not always about you, Mabel." That's when my dad chimed in. He had been watching the whole thing with a detached amusement, a little smirk playing on his lips. "You're overreacting, Mabel," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "It's Christmas. Don't ruin it for everyone because you're feeling a little sensitive." The smirk, that goddamn smirk. It was the same smirk he gave me when I came home crying after being bullied in middle school. The same smirk he had when my first boyfriend broke my heart. It was a smirk that said, "Your feelings are trivial. You are an inconvenience." I just stared at him. All the anger, all the hurt, all the years of feeling like the odd one out, the responsible one, the one who wasn't as loved or as special as my brother, coalesced into a single moment of ice-cold clarity. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just nodded. "You're right," I said softly. Then I turned, walked over to my kids, and helped them into their coats. Ben was already standing by the door, holding my jacket, his face a mask of quiet fury on my behalf. We walked out of that house, leaving behind the mountain of presents, the half-eaten appetizers, and the stunned, indignant faces of my family. The lie had been unveiled, and with it, a truth I could no longer ignore. The 45-minute drive home was the quietest car ride I've ever experienced with my children. The silence was heavy, thick with unspoken questions and unshed tears. Ben drove, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. He kept glancing over at me, his eyes full of concern, but he didn't speak, giving me the space I needed. In the backseat, Lily stared out the window, tracing patterns on the fogged glass, while Leo had finally let his tears fall, his quiet sobs muffled by the collar of his coat. I didn't try to comfort them with platitudes or empty promises. What could I say? It's not about the presents. Of course it wasn't, not really. But try explaining that to an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old who just witnessed their cousins being showered with love in the form of thousands of dollars in gifts while they were intentionally left out. They hadn't just been denied presents, they had been denied a place. They had been shown, in the most brutal and material way possible, that they were second-tier grandchildren, an afterthought. The image that burned in my mind wasn't the iPhone or the gaming PC. It was my father's smirk, that dismissive, condescending little twitch of his lips that had invalidated my feelings my entire life. "You're overreacting. You're too sensitive. Don't make a big deal out of nothing." For years, I had internalized those messages. I had questioned my own reactions, smoothed things over, and adapted. I was the family project manager, the one who made sure everyone else's needs were met, the one who balanced the emotional budget. I had spent a lifetime absorbing the friction so that everyone else could have a smooth ride. And for what? To be lied to, manipulated, and then mocked when I finally showed a flicker of hurt. The smirk wasn't just about the Christmas gifts. It was about everything. It was the echo of 1,000 tiny cuts I had endured over the years. It was the time my parents used the money I loaned them for a leaky roof to help Mark buy a new car. It was the countless birthdays and anniversaries of mine they'd forgotten, while Mark's were celebrated with lavish dinners I was expected to help pay for. It was the constant, unspoken assumption that because I was stable, responsible, and financially secure, I didn't need their support or consideration. I wasn't the daughter to be doted on. I was the resource to be tapped. When we got home, the kids trudged inside and went straight to their rooms. Ben followed me into the kitchen. "Mabel," he said softly, putting his hands on my shoulders. "Are you okay?" I shook my head, a dry, humorless laugh escaping my lips. "No, Ben, I'm not okay. I am so far from okay." I started pacing the length of our kitchen, a furious energy thrumming through my veins. "Do you see it now? Do you see what I've been talking about all these years? The little comments, the favors for Mark the way they always put him first." "I've always seen it," he said, his voice firm. "I just followed your lead. You always wanted to keep the peace." He was right, I had always been the peacekeeper. But peace at what cost? My dignity, my children's happiness. I stopped pacing and looked at him, a dawning realization spreading through me. It was all a setup. The phone call from my mom, a Christmas of convenience. Convenient for whom? For them. They got to look like they were being frugal and considerate of Mark's slow year, while secretly planning this spectacle. They knew we would follow the rules. They counted on it. They used my reliability, my sense of fairness, against me. They wanted us to show up empty-handed. They wanted to create that exact scene. The pieces started clicking into place with sickening clarity. Mark's slow year was a recurring theme, a convenient excuse he trotted out whenever he needed money or a favor. Yet, somehow, he always managed to afford designer clothes and expensive gadgets. How? The answer was suddenly obvious. My parents were subsidizing his lifestyle, and I, in turn, was subsidizing my parents. A wave of nausea washed over me. I thought about the family cell phone plan that was under my name, the one that included my parents and Mark. I thought about the streaming services, Netflix, HBO, Disney+, all linked to my credit card, with profiles for every member of my extended family. I thought about the AAA membership I paid for, which covered their cars as well as mine. The Amazon Prime account. The Costco membership. For years, I had been the silent, unacknowledged provider of their modern-day comforts, all under the guise of helping out. My father's smirk floated in my mind again. He wasn't just dismissing my feelings about the presents. He was smirking at the whole damn arrangement. He was smirking because he knew I was paying for the very phone my mother used to lie to me. He was smirking because he knew they had me locked into a system of obligation and guilt, and he never thought I'd be brave enough to challenge it. "They think I'm overreacting," I whispered, more to myself than to Ben. "They think I'm just going to cool off, call and apologize for making a scene, and everything will go back to normal." Ben wrapped his arms around me. "You don't have to do that, Mabel. You don't have to do anything." I leaned into his embrace, but my mind was already racing. A project manager's mind, assessing the situation, defining the deliverables, identifying the dependencies. For the first time, I wasn't thinking about how to fix my family. I was thinking about how to dismantle the system that had been exploiting me. The smirk wasn't an insult, it was a trigger. It was the official kickoff for a new project, Project Severance, and the first phase was about to begin. The echo of that smirk would be the soundtrack to my liberation. That night, after I finally managed to coax the kids out of their rooms and we ordered pizza for our own quiet, sad little Christmas dinner, I waited until they were asleep. Ben was tidying up the kitchen, the grim set of his jaw telling me he was still furious on my behalf. I walked into my home office, closed the door, and sat down in the stillness. The adrenaline from the confrontation had faded, replaced by a cold, methodical resolve. It was time to do what I do best, audit the project. I opened my laptop and pulled up a fresh spreadsheet. I titled it simply, The Ledger. For years, I had compartmentalized these expenses. A little charge here for a subscription, a bigger bill there for the phone plan. I'd never looked at them all together, never tallied the true cost of being the responsible one. Tonight, I would. The first and biggest item was the family mobile plan. I logged into my account with the carrier. There it was, 5 lines. Mine, Ben's, and then 3 others I had added over a decade ago when my parents were transitioning to smartphones, and Mark was, as usual, between jobs. The total bill was a staggering $280 a month. My line and Ben's accounted for about $110 of that. That meant I was paying $170 every single month for my parents and my brother to have unlimited data and the latest phones, which I now realized I had also been subsidizing through the carrier's upgrade program. I did a quick calculation. Over 12 months, that was $2,040. Over 10 years, that was over $20,000. I felt a W. Ave of dizziness. I entered the figure into my spreadsheet, my fingers clicking on the keyboard with sharp, angry taps. Next, the subscriptions. This was going to be tedious. I started with the obvious ones. Netflix. The premium plan, of course, so everyone could watch on multiple screens in glorious 4K. I checked the account settings. Active profiles, Mabel and Ben, the kids, Mom and Dad, Mark and Scarlett, all drawing from my monthly fee of $22.99. Not a huge amount, but it was the principle. Then came Disney Plus. Same story. Hulu, same story. HBO Max, same story. Spotify, the family plan, where Mark was a notorious playlist hog. Each one was a small leak, but together they were a flood. I added them all up. It came to nearly $90 a month in shared entertainment that I was footing the bill for. Over a year, another $1,000. I dug deeper. Amazon Prime, my account. But I had shared the login with my mom years ago so she could get free shipping on a birthday present for one of the kids. I logged in and checked the order history. I scrolled past my own purchases and found a sprawling list of items I didn't recognize, all shipped to my parents' or Mark's address. Power tools for my dad. Expensive skincare for my mom. Video games for Mason. Clothes for Scarlett. They weren't just using the free shipping. They were using my saved credit card information. My blood ran cold. This wasn't sharing, this was theft. Some were small, $20 or $30 purchases that could easily be overlooked in a busy month. But others were significant. A $300 smart watch for Mark last month. A $400 vacuum cleaner for my parents' house back in August. They had been doing this for years, making purchases on my account, confident I was either too busy or too foolish to notice. They must have assumed I would see the charges, mistake them for my own, and simply pay the bill. And the sickening thing was, they were right. I had been doing exactly that. I spent the next hour meticulously going through years of Amazon order history, credit card statements, and bank records. Every discovery was like another twist of the knife. There was the AAA Premier membership, $130 a year. I had added my parents and Mark to my plan for peace of mind. My dad had used the 200-mile tow service twice in the last 3 years when his old truck broke down. Mark had used the roadside assistance for lockouts more times than I could count. There was the Costco executive membership. I paid for it, but there were 3 cards on the account, mine, my mom's, and Scarlett's. They got the benefit of the bulk pricing and the 2% annual reward, all on my dime. The list went on and on. cloud storage for family photos, which my mom and brother used but I paid for, a newspaper subscription my dad wanted, delivered to his house but billed to my card. It was a vast, intricate web of financial dependencies, and I was the spider at the center, single-handedly holding it all together. By 2 a.m., my spreadsheet was complete. I created a final tab and titled it Grand Total. I summed up the columns, broken down by category: utilities, subscriptions, direct purchases, memberships. I held my breath and looked at the number at the bottom of the screen. In the last 5 years alone, not counting the cell phone plan, I had spent over $18,000 on them through direct purchases on my Amazon account and shared memberships. Adding in the phone plan brought the total to over $28,000. And that was just for 5 years. The real total, stretching back over a decade, was likely double that. I leaned back in my chair, feeling hollowed out. It wasn't just money. It was a ledger of my own stupidity. A record of every time I had chosen to believe the best of them, every time I had overlooked a red flag, every time I had paid a bill without question because it was easier than confronting them. My father's smirk came back to me, clearer than ever. He wasn't just laughing at my hurt feelings. He was laughing at my naivete. He and my mother and my brother had built a comfortable life for themselves, padded with conveniences and luxuries that I provided, all while cultivating a narrative that I was the uptight, oversensitive one, and my brother was the one who needed the help. I looked at the spreadsheet again. This wasn't just a list of expenses. This was evidence. This was the justification for what I was about to do. I had been the silent funder of their lives for far too long. The Bank of Mabel was officially closing its doors, and the foreclosure was going to be swift, total, and without warning. At 2:30 a.m. on Christmas night, with the glow of my monitor painting stripes across my determined face, I initiated what I had mentally dubbed Operation Severance. There would be no dramatic phone calls, no tearful goodbyes, no final warnings. A project manager doesn't pull the plug by holding a committee meeting. They do it with a series of decisive, irreversible actions. My family communicated their position through deception and mockery. I would communicate mine through silence and consequences. My first target was the most complex but also the most satisfying: the shared accounts. I started with Amazon. I went into my account settings and found the section for saved payment methods. My primary credit card was listed there. With a deep breath, I clicked Remove. A confirmation box popped up. Are you sure? This will affect your Prime membership and any active subscriptions. I clicked Yes. Then I went a step further. I changed my password to a long, complex string of random characters that I saved only in my password manager. Finally, I logged out on all devices remotely. The door was shut and locked. Any purchase attempts from their devices would now fail, and they wouldn't be able to log in to find out why. Next, Netflix. I navigated to the account page. The list of profiles stared back at me: Mom and Dad, Mark and Scarlett. I felt a pang of something, not guilt, but a strange sort of nostalgia for the illusion of a happy, sharing family. I squashed it ruthlessly. This wasn't sharing, it was parasitic. I could have just changed the password, but that felt too passive. I wanted to make a statement. I scrolled down and found the big red button, Cancel Membership. I clicked it. My access would continue until the end of the billing cycle in mid-January. It was a clean, simple amputation. I repeated the process for Hulu, Disney+, Spotify, and every other streaming service I had been providing. Click, confirm, cancel, over and over. It was a litany of liberation. The memberships were next. I logged into my AAA account online. It was easy to find the list of associated members. Beside my parents' names and my brother's name was a simple link: Remove from plan. 3 clicks and they were gone. No more free tows, no more free lockouts. I imagined my father standing on the side of a highway with his broken-down truck, calling for a tow only to be told his membership was invalid. The thought brought a grim smile to my face. For the Costco account, I would have to go in person to the membership desk to remove them, but I made a note to do it the very next day. The final and biggest pillar of my enforced generosity was the phone plan. This was the one that made me pause. Cutting off someone's phone felt drastic, almost cruel. It was their lifeline. But then I remembered Leo's tear-streaked face. I remembered my father's smirk. Their phone was the very tool my mother had used to orchestrate this whole humiliation. It wasn't a lifeline, it was a weapon. They could get their own damn phone plan. I opened the carrier's website. I couldn't just remove them from my plan, that would deactivate their numbers. The proper way was to transfer liability, a process they would have to initiate. I wasn't interested in a proper way. I was interested in an effective way. I navigated through the labyrinth of account settings until I found what I was looking for, the option to suspend a line. The site warned me that this was a temporary measure, usually for lost or stolen phones. A suspended line can't make calls, send texts, or use data. It effectively bricks the phone until the suspension is lifted. One by one, I clicked on their numbers. Line 3, Evelyn. Reason for suspension? I selected lost stolen. Click suspend line. Click line 4, Cameron, suspend. Line 5, Mark, suspend. It was done. In the space of less than an hour, I had dismantled a financial framework that had been in place for over a decade. I had severed every cord, cut every string, and burned every bridge. I leaned back in my chair, my heart pounding. It was a terrifying feeling. I had just declared war on my entire family. But underneath the terror was a profound sense of peace. The weight on my shoulders, the one I had been carrying for so long that I'd forgotten it was even there, was gone. I was no longer responsible for their comfort, their entertainment, or their irresponsibility. Ben appeared at the doorway, a mug of tea in his hand. He had been watching me, giving me space but staying close. "Done?" he asked softly. I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. I turned the monitor so he could see the spreadsheet, the ledger of a lifetime of being taken for granted. He looked at the final number at the bottom and let out a low whistle. He looked back at me, and there was no judgment in his eyes, only fierce, unwavering support. "Good," he said simply. "It's about time." I shut down the laptop. The house was dark and silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator. I knew the morning would bring a storm. My phone would ring off the hook. There would be anger, accusations, and probably tears. They would call me selfish, cruel, and vindictive. And for the first time in my life, I didn't care what they called me. I had the ledger. I had the truth. And I had the quiet, unshakable knowledge that I had finally, after 38 years, chosen myself. Operation Severance was complete. Now, all I had to do was wait for the fallout. It wouldn't take long. The storm broke not with a bang, but with a buzz. At 7:03 a.m. the next morning, my phone lit up with an incoming call from Mom. I was already awake, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring out at the gray dawn. I had slept for maybe 3 hours, a fitful, adrenaline-fueled sleep, but I felt more clear-headed than I had in years. I looked at the screen, my heart giving a nervous flutter, and I silenced the call. A minute later, it rang again. I silenced it again. A text message appeared. "Mabel, my phone isn't working, call me." I took a sip of my coffee. Another text. "Mark's isn't working either. What is going on? Did you pay the bill?" The sheer audacity of that last question almost made me laugh. Did I pay the bill? The bill I had been paying for them without fail for over 10 years. Then my father started calling. I silenced his calls, too. Then Mark. Then Scarlett, presumably from her work phone. My phone began to vibrate nonstop, a frantic, buzzing tantrum from a family that had just lost its connection to the mothership. The calls came one after another, a relentless barrage of entitlement and confusion. I counted them. In the span of 30 minutes, I had 27 missed calls from 4 different numbers. I ignored them all. I made breakfast for the kids, my movements calm and deliberate. Lily and Leo were subdued, still nursing the wounds from yesterday, but they seemed to sense a shift in the atmosphere. The frantic energy that usually surrounded any conflict with my family was gone, replaced by a strange tranquility in our home. Around 8:30 a.m., the texts became more frantic. From Mom, "Mabel, this isn't funny. I can't even call 911. You're putting us in danger." turn our phones back on now. From Mark, whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Stop being a child and fix this. From Dad, your mother is having a panic attack. I'm going to hold you responsible if something happens to her. The manipulation was so predictable, so transparent. They cycled through confusion, then anger, then guilt-tripping, hitting all the classic notes of a narcissist's prayer. I continued to ignore them. I knew they could call 911 on a suspended phone. Her lie was as pathetic as it was obvious. The 40th missed call came around 9:15 a.m. By then, I had loaded the dishwasher and was helping Leo with a Lego creation. And then, I heard it. A firm, authoritative knock on my front door. Ben and I exchanged a look. He stood up, his expression hardening, and walked to the door. I followed a few steps behind, my heart pounding in my chest. He peered through the peephole. "Mabel," he said, his voice low, "it's the police." I felt a jolt of pure shock. They had actually called the police. I couldn't believe the nerve, the absolute weaponized melodrama of it. Ben opened the door to find two uniformed officers standing on our porch, their expressions neutral but serious. "Good morning," the older officer said. "Are you Mabel and Ben?" "We are," Ben replied, positioning himself slightly in front of me. "How can we help you, officers?" "We received a call to perform a wellness check," the officer explained. "From an Evelyn and Cameron last name. They said they were concerned for your well-being. They said you left their home yesterday in a state of distress and haven't been answering your phones." A wellness check. It was a masterstroke of manipulative genius, I had to admit. They had found a way to force a confrontation, to use public resources to harass me into responding. They had painted me as unstable, as a cause for concern, framing themselves as the worried, loving parents. I stepped forward, my shock hardening back into resolve. "Officers, I am Mabel. I am perfectly fine, as you can see. My children are fine. My husband is fine." The younger officer looked from me to my parents, names on his note-up. "So you have been in contact with them?" "No," I said calmly and clearly. "I have not, and I don't intend to be. Yesterday, I made a personal decision to end communication with my parents and my brother. They have been calling me incessantly this morning, and when I didn't respond, it appears they decided to involve you." The older officer's eyes narrowed slightly. He had seen this kind of domestic drama 100 times before. "So, to be clear, you are not in any danger. You are safe here." "Completely safe," I confirmed. "The only distress I'm in is the distress of being harassed by my family to the point where they are wasting your valuable time." I saw a flicker of understanding in his expression. He knew. "All right, ma'am," he said with a nod. "We just have to check. We'll let them know you're safe." "Thank you, officers. I appreciate it," I said, "and I'm sorry for the trouble." As they turned to leave, a car screeched to a halt at the curb in front of my house. It was my brother Mark's oversized SUV. He practically jumped out of the car, his face purple with rage. My mother was in the passenger seat, looking distraught. "Mabel," Mark yelled, striding up my lawn, "what the hell did you do?" The officers immediately turned around. "Sir, I'm going to need you to stay back," the younger one said, putting a hand up. Mark ignored him. He jabbed a finger at me. "She cut off our phones. She stole our Netflix. She is trying to ruin our lives because she got her feelings hurt over some stupid Christmas presents." My mother got out of the car, clutching a tissue. "Mabel, please," she wailed. "Just talk to us. Why are you doing this to us?" It was a full-blown spectacle, right on my front lawn for all my neighbors to see. The blue and red lights of the police car were still flashing, casting a surreal glow on the morning. But I felt nothing. No embarrassment, no shame, just a profound sense of detachment. I was watching a play, and the actors were terrible. I looked at the older officer. "This is the harassment I was referring to," I said in a level voice. He nodded grimly and turned to my brother. "Sir, this is a private residence. The owner has stated she does not want contact. I suggest you and your mother get back in your vehicle and leave." "This is a family matter," Mark sputtered, gesturing wildly. "You can't tell me I can't talk to my own sister." "I can, and I am," the officer said, his voice hardening into a command. "Leave now, or I'll be forced to cite you for trespassing." Mark stared at the officer, then at me, his eyes filled with a furious, impotent rage. He knew he had lost. His ultimate power play, involving the authorities, had backfired spectacularly. They hadn't come to rescue him, they had come to protect me from him. He stormed back to his car, yanked the door open, and practically shoved my weeping mother inside. He shot one last venomous glare in my direction before peeling away from the curb. The officers stayed for another minute, making sure they were gone. "If they come back, you call us immediately," the older one said. I thanked them again. Ben closed the door, and the silence that filled our house was the most peaceful sound I had ever heard. The blue and red dawn had passed. The storm had hit, and I was still standing. The days that followed the front lawn showdown were filled with a new kind of silence. The constant buzz of my phone ceased. The stream of manipulative texts stopped. It seemed the threat of a trespassing charge was more effective than any boundary I had ever tried to set verbally. But it was more than just an absence of their calls, it was an absence of obligation. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel the low-level hum of anxiety about what my family needed, what they wanted, or how they were feeling. That mental and emotional space, now vacant, was startlingly vast. In that quiet, my own family began to heal. The first few days were tender. Lily and Leo were wary, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. Ben and I focused entirely on them. We took down our Christmas decorations together, not with sadness, but with a sense of closing a chapter. We played board games, watched movies on our own blessedly private accounts, and had long talks. One evening, while I was tucking her in, Lily looked at me with her serious, old-soul eyes. "Are we going to see Grandma and Grandpa again?" she asked. I sat on the edge of her bed and took her hand. "I don't know, sweetie," I answered honestly. "Things are very complicated with them right now, but no matter what happens, you need to know that Mommy and Daddy will always, always protect you and make sure you feel loved and important. What happened at Christmas was not okay, and it was not your fault." She nodded, seeming to accept that. "Their presents were too big anyway," she mumbled into her pillow, and I knew in that moment that she was going to be all right. A week later, a letter arrived. It was a formal-looking envelope, addressed to me in my mother's elegant handwriting. I opened it with a steady hand. It was not an apology, it was a bill. She had meticulously itemized every significant gift they had given me since my 18th birthday. A contribution to my first car, a check for my college graduation, the money they gave us for our wedding. She had even included an estimated value for years of free babysitting. The total came to an absurdly high number, and the letter concluded with a single, chilling sentence. "Since you have chosen to sever your ties with this family and revoke the support we have all come to rely on, we expect to be reimbursed for the investment we have made in you." I read it twice, and then I started to laugh. It was a genuine, belly-deep laugh of pure, unadulterated freedom. This was it. This was the pathetic, transactional core of our relationship, laid bare on a single sheet of paper. They didn't see me as a daughter, they saw me as an investment that had defaulted. Their love, their support, it all had a price tag. And because I was no longer paying the exorbitant interest on that loan, in the form of phone bills, subscriptions, and emotional servitude, they were calling in the principal. I didn't dignify it with a response. I took the letter, walked over to the shredder in my office, and fed it through. The whining buzz of the machine was the sound of the final, meaningless thread being severed. The silence from their end became permanent after that. Through the grapevine of distant relatives, I heard bits and pieces. Mark and Scarlett had to downgrade their phone plan and were complaining about the cost of all their streaming services. My parents had to sell my dad's old truck because a recent repair bill, without the free AAA tow and the assumption I would chip in, was too high. They were portraying me as a cold, materialistic monster who had abandoned them over a few presents. Some relatives believed them. Others, who had their own stories of my family's entitled behavior, sent quiet messages of support. I accepted both outcomes with equal indifference. The court of public family opinion was a jurisdiction I no longer recognized. My life, once cluttered with their needs, became my own. Ben and I calculated the money we were saving, over $300 a month. We redirected it into a vacation fund and college savings accounts for our kids. We started planning a trip to the national parks, something Lily and Leo had been dreaming of. The money was just a symbol, though. The real dividend was the peace. It was the sound of a quiet Saturday morning with no frantic texts from Mark asking for a favor. It was the joy of watching a movie with my kids without seeing a profile for Mom and Dad on the screen. It was the simple, profound relief of being responsible for only my own small, happy family. I don't know if I will ever speak to my parents or my brother again. Maybe years from now, a genuine, heartfelt apology might arrive, but I'm not waiting for it. An apology now wouldn't be for me, it would be for them, an attempt to get back what they lost. And what they lost wasn't just a daughter and a sister. It was a system. It was their primary source of funding, their IT department, their subscription manager, and their emotional punching bag. I wasn't a person to them, I was a utility. And I had finally cut the service. My house is quiet now. It's a silence born not of anger or sadness, but of strength. It is the sound of boundaries being held. It is the sound of my children's laughter filling the space once occupied by my anxiety. It's the sound of a new silence, one I built myself, and it is the most beautiful thing I have ever heard.